My name is Linda Harper. I'm 66 years old, and I live in a quiet neighborhood just outside Seattle. Most mornings, my house wakes before I do the kettle size. The heater clicks on, and sunlight slips through the kitchen blinds, like it knows where it belongs. That morning felt no different at first. I remember the clock reading 7:05 when I decided to start the day slow. Just me and the rhythm of the house. I was wiping the counter when my phone buzzed. It was a message from my younger son, Connor. He was boarding a flight to Paris for work. Just another routine day for him. The text was short, ordinary, almost, but it landed like a jolt because he mentioned something impossible. He said Maya, my daughter-in-law, had just boarded his plane, and upstairs, the shower was still running. The water kept humming. My world stopped. The morning after that message, I tried to convince myself nothing was wrong. The house moved through its usual rhythm, cereal bowls clinking, Owen's feet running down the hallway, the soft thump of the dog settling under the table. By 7:30, Jason had already left for work, and the world seemed predictably normal again. Maya, or the woman I still believed was her, floated through the kitchen, the way she always did. Calm, precise, with that faint scent of eucalyptus she liked so much. Everything she did had a kind of gentle certainty. The thermostat, always set to exactly 72. Lunches labeled by color. The pantry alphabetized because it helps the system. At first, I thought these habits were simply her way of showing love, but over time, they began to feel like quiet reminders that I was only a guest in my own home. The rules were soft, but they carried weight. No sugar before 9. No starch at dinner. Even bedtime stories came with conditions about tone and consistency. I used to think control came with shouting. I was wrong. Sometimes it comes wrapped in kindness, in the sort of calm voice that insists it's helping. That was when I first started paying closer attention. It was 8:17 that morning when my phone lit up again. I remember because the sunlight hit the counter just as it buzzed, scattering across the sink like a signal I couldn't ignore. It was Connor, my younger son, the one who practically lives in the sky. His messages always come short, steady, no room for confusion. He said he'd just boarded, ready for takeoff. Then, almost casually, he mentioned that Maya was on the flight. He described her exactly the way I'd seen her just minutes before. Red scarf, neat hair, that calm smile she wears when she's pretending she isn't nervous. I looked toward the ceiling then, half expecting to hear silence, but the water was still running upstairs. The sound pulsed steady through the pipes. For a moment, I tried to believe I'd misunderstood him. Maybe a coincidence. Maybe another passenger who looked like her. But deep down, my body reacted before my mind did. My hands went still. My breath caught. And I felt that strange pull in my stomach, the one that warns you the world just tilted. I wanted to look away, to forget it. But once truth knocks, you can't unhear it. And that was the moment everything shifted. At 8:42 that same morning, she came downstairs. Her hair was still damp. Her navy dress pressed sharp as always. She smiled, calm and familiar. And for a moment I almost believed everything was fine. Almost. But Connor's message echoed through my headseat 2A. Red scarf, and it wouldn't fade. So instead of confronting her, I did what I've always done when something feels off. I wrote it down. I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed the date, the time, and the details that didn't fit. Just facts. No feelings. It wasn't proof. But it was something I could hold on to when the world tried to tell me I was imagining things. I told myself I wouldn't accuse anyone. Not yet. I'd simply observe. Because the truth, when it's real, always reveals itself. And that morning, I could already feel it stirring beneath the quiet. The days that followed felt ordinary on the surface. But small cracks kept showing. They were the kind of details most people would overlook, tiny, almost polite differences that only someone who'd lived inside the rhythm of this house would notice. She stirred her coffee with her left hand one morning. Even though she'd always been right-handed, when I asked if her wrist hurt, she just smiled too brightly and switched hands mid-motion. Another time, her handwriting leaned to the left instead of right, and I caught myself staring at a grocery note longer than anyone should. She called Owen buddy instead of sweetheart. And for a moment, I saw confusion flicker across his face. Even her tone changed lighter one day, lower the next to Bannon. And then there was the way she forgot where the flour was kept. Standing in front of the pantry like a guest. Each thing on its own could have been nothing. Just the mess of a busy life. But together, they built something undeniable, a quiet dissonance that hummed beneath every conversation. Every breakfast. Every ordinary sound in the house. I started keeping track of it all. Not because I wanted to prove her wrong, but because I needed to prove I wasn't losing my mind. By the end of that week, I began to wonder if I was imagining everything until other people started noticing too. That's when the chill really settled in. Helen, my neighbor from across the street, mentioned that she'd seen Maya twice in one day. Once in the morning, cheerful and waving, like always. Then again that same afternoon, same coat, same hair, but she walked right past without a glance. Helen said it so casually, but her eyes lingered on me, waiting to see if I'd make sense of it. I couldn't. Then, there was the produce stand at the corner. The woman who sells vegetables told me Maya had argued over the price of peppers one day, then returned the next to compliment the same display. Same person. Two completely opposite moods. Even the bakery down the street noticed. The young man behind the counter said she'd come in for whole wheat bread one day and sugary pastries the next. Laughing about craving opposites. Each comment landed like confirmation I hadn't asked for. Every stranger's small remark added weight to something I could no longer dismiss. It wasn't just me anymore. The city itself was beginning to whisper the same impossible thing, and I started to listen. That Sunday morning, I stood at the sink, hands resting on the counter, watching the light crawl across the kitchen tiles. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock. It should have felt peaceful, but it didn't. It felt staged, too tidy, too calm. That's when I realized I'd spent years mistaking silence for harmony. I had smoothed things over, adjusted, compromised, and called it love. But love shouldn't make you feel smaller every time you try to stand up straight. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I was awake. That single thought grounded me in a way nothing else had. I decided I wouldn't fight or plead or prove. I would simply see. And once I made that choice, the house, the whole life I'd built, sounded different. That afternoon, around 11:30, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and a calm I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't plotting revenge or trying to trap anyone. I just wanted to see what my life sounded like without all the noise I'd been keeping alive. I logged into every account I managed for this house, the grocery auto orders, the fancy bottled water subscription, the rideshare plan that made sure Owen always had a ride home if Jason or Maya were busy. One by one, I turned them off. No announcement. No explanation. Just a quiet click and a note in my little book with the time and date. The moment I stopped fixing things, the air in the room changed. It was subtle, but real. For the first time, I felt the house breathe on its own. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I finally understood what balance felt like. My silence wasn't weakness anymore, it was a boundary. I knew they'd notice soon enough. And when they did, I wanted to see what truth surfaced once convenience disappeared. Because sometimes, the loudest statement you can make is simply to stop holding everything together. It didn't take long for Jason to notice the changes. The first sign came when the coffee ran out followed by a quiet irritation disguised as concern. He asked if I'd forgotten to reorder. But what struck me most wasn't his tone, it was the disbelief behind it. As if the idea that I might stop managing the small details of his life was unthinkable. That's when I saw it clearly. It wasn't Maya who had built this house around control. It was my son. The routines. The rules. The we decided statements, they all carried his signature. I realized he didn't want peace, he wanted order. His version of it. Even if it meant everyone else lived smaller. He'd learned to mass control his care. To turn every boundary into a problem only he could fix. For years, I mistook that for responsibility. I thought he was being protective. When really, he was preserving his authority. The worst part was how effortlessly he used charm to keep everyone steady around him. Even when I started to question things, he brushed it off like I was overanalyzing. Too emotional. Too sensitive. That was the moment I stopped trying to win his approval. I didn't need to argue anymore. I just needed to keep watching because people who live by control always reveal themselves when it's gone. A few days later, Connor called during a layover. He has this calmness in his voice that's always steadied me. Even when everything else feels uncertain. I didn't tell him much at first, just that things in the house didn't feel right. But he already knew something was off. He'd looked into his flight log, double-checked his manifest, and quietly confirmed what I was afraid to hear. The passenger in seat 2A, the one with the red scarf, wasn't a coincidence. He told me to keep doing what I was already doing, observe, document, stay grounded, no confrontations, no accusations. Not yet. His confidence gave me strength. I didn't know I still had. Later that night, I printed out the flight record and tucked it inside my notebook. I didn't need anyone to believe me anymore. Connor's quiet faith was enough. The truth had a shape now, and I wasn't afraid to trace its outline. That night, I sat at the dining table with my notebook open, and every page spread out like a quiet investigation. The flight log Connor sent me, the blurry photo of the red scarf, the receipts from the market, all of it came together in one pattern I couldn't ignore. I printed each piece, labeled them with dates, and wrote down the smallest details, times, places, reactions, even the tone of her voice. It wasn't obsession, it was preservation. A way to protect my sanity in a house that no longer felt honest. When I stapled the last page, the sound startled me. It was sharp. Final. Like truth sealing itself shut. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was preparing. I didn't know how or when it would come to light, but I knew it would. The tension in the house didn't explode, it leaked. Slowly. Quietly. Through the cracks we all pretended not to see. Owen was the first to feel it. Children always know before adults admit it. He started hesitating before bedtime, asking me to read instead of her. One night, he told me his mom sometimes forgot the song she used to sing. The one about the moon and the tree. He said she sounded different. Like someone else was trying to remember the words. I told him she was just tired. But inside, my stomach turned cold. The house changed too. The laughter at dinner grew thinner. The mornings sharper around the edges. Even the air seemed heavier. As if the walls themselves were keeping secrets. Jason noticed. Of course. But he called it stress. Work pressure. Anything except what it really was. And I let him. I had to. Because the truth wasn't ready yet, and I needed Owen to stay protected inside whatever calm I could still create. Some nights I sat in the dark kitchen after everyone had gone to bed, listening to the hum of the fridge and the faint drip in the sink. It was the sound of a family pretending to hold together, but the silence between us had already started to fracture. By Sunday evening, I knew what I had to do. I didn't plan some dramatic confrontation or emotional explosion. That was never my way. I simply decided to bring everyone together, Jason, Connor, Owen, and the woman still pretending to be Maya. At 6 o'clock, the table was set. The smell of rosemary chicken filled the house. In the same meal I used to make on quiet weekends when we all still trusted each other. The candles flickered softly, their light steady against the weight of what was coming. I laid out the plates, folded the napkins, and placed my small black notebook beside mine, not to wave as proof, but to remind myself that I wasn't crazy. As I moved through the familiar motions, pouring water, checking the oven, I felt calm. Not fearless, but ready. That dinner wasn't about confrontation. It was about truth finally being invited to the table. Dinner began quietly. The clatter of forks, the soft hum of Owen talking about school, the sound of a family pretending to be ordinary, but underneath it all, there was something else, a pulse. Steady and waiting. I watched her carefully as she poured herself water. Her movements precise, almost rehearsed. She looked like Maya in every visible way, the same hair, the same gentle smile, but her eyes kept darting toward Jason, as if asking permission. I felt Connor's presence across the table, calm and steady, the same way he was when he told me to hold on to facts, not fear. At the right moment, he leaned back, his tone light, but his words deliberate. He mentioned his flight. The red scarf. Seat 2A. The air changed instantly. She froze. Her hand tightened around the glass. Just slightly, but enough to make it tremble. Jason's face shifted. Confusion first, then worry. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I reached for my phone, pressed play on the message Connor had sent weeks ago, the one where he mentioned her boarding the plane. The sound filled the room like a truth we could no longer ignore. Then I slid the photo across the table, the red scarf, the same profile. For a long moment, no one spoke. Even Owen went still. And in that silence, her smile cracked just a fraction. But it was enough. The woman at my table wasn't my daughter-in-law. As the silence stretched, Jason spoke first. But it wasn't confusion, I heard it was defense. He wasn't asking what happened. He was already trying to explain it away. That's when I knew. He had known something. Maybe not the whole truth, but enough to stay quiet. I could see the guilt flicker in his eyes. Not for what she had done, but for how long he had let it continue. The puzzle pieces I'd ignored for months suddenly aligned: his late nights, the urgent meetings, the way he dismissed my worries with that patient tone reserved for children and fragile people. When I checked the shared ride logs later, the truth sat there in plain sight: trips to the same address across town, charged to the household account, calendar events moved or deleted without explanation, files renamed under both their names. He had built a system where secrets could live safely. He didn't orchestrate the lie, but he protected it, because the appearance of control mattered more than the chaos underneath. In that moment, I didn't feel rage. I felt a quiet kind of grief, the kind that comes when you realize the person you raised learned to weaponize calm, the same way you once used it to survive. And I knew, after that dinner, nothing in our family would ever be silent again. By the next morning, the truth had left the shadows. Connor had already shared everything with the authorities. The real Maya was found alive, shaken but safe. Leah, her twin, was taken into custody. Jason faced the quiet consequences of his own choices: career fallout, separation, and the realization that control had cost him his family. There were no victories, only release. In the days that followed, the house felt different, though nothing had changed in its walls. The lemon scent lingered in the kitchen. Owen's laughter echoed freely again, and the thermostat finally rested at a human temperature, not one dictated by unseen rules. I spent evenings on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city lights blur into firefly-like glimmers. The tension that had lived in every corner of the house had softened, leaving quiet space for breathing, for noticing, for being. I felt a calm that wasn't passive. It was earned. I could see clearly, without the weight of someone else's control. And for the first time in years, I knew I was present in my own life, not just a witness to it. It was enough. It had to be. I learned that seeing clearly matters more than arguing loudly. Sometimes love is quiet courage, and awareness is protection.